Emitting all. Huh. Oh, there we go. Alrighty, cool. We're getting some people joining. Awesome, awesome. Welcome, boys and girls. It's all admitting slowly. I'm just clicking admit all. Okay, cool. Let's begin with the slide share. And let's begin. From the beginning, see waiting room, admitting everybody to the party. Hopefully everyone got the invitation. I did send them out this afternoon, so everyone should have the right password. Okay, so just an update from next week, guys. All groups will have the same password because some people are having problems connecting for some reason. I keep different passwords because I'm trying to avoid the hackers breaking in and spreading all sorts of weird things on the page. It happens, so I change the passwords for every group. But we're going to try to avoid that next week and have everyone the same password, and the ships will fall there where they're made. This week, the second book of the week is The Field Guide to the Battlefields of South Africa. Get this book. It's not always just about the plants and the animals. It's about the history as well. A very, very, very handy book to have and just really interesting to read, and just a nice crash course on understanding the planet, or not the planet, sorry, the country that we live in. We're not with the entire world, even though South Africa seems to think it is. Okay, so this nice class is really just a burner, an absolute burner. We've got a lot of material to get through. Pay attention. I will be uploading the video in the next couple of days. So bear with me if you don't remember everything. A lot of big words, a lot of concepts, but I will upload the video so you guys can repeat and watch as many times as you need to. Cool. So birds are everywhere. And they're found in every terrestrial habitat on Earth. And today we know there's around 10,000 species of birds worldwide. South Africa is host to around 960 species, which is about just under 10% of all species on Earth. Bear in mind that we've got about 2% of the world's landmass. So 2% of the world's landmass, only 10% of the world's species. It's pretty good, actually, in terms of biodiversity. And what is a bird? I mean, we all know what a bird is. You can point out a bird. But unlike reptiles, birds can maintain their own body temperature, i.e. they're endothermic. They have feathers, probably the most unifying feature of all birds. They have jaws, sorry, Leon's late. They have jaws in a keratinous sheath. They have hard-shelled eggs, and we've got more people arriving late. I'm going to admit them all. And they have a four-chambered heart, just like crocodiles and unlike the other reptiles. Okay, so diving straight in, let's talk about feathers, the most important feature of a bird. Feathers are as varied as the number of bird species themselves. They all have different roles. So feathers are highly specialized and form specific roles. We're not going to go into all the feathers because we're not doing a PhD in ornithology. We're going to do some basic feathers tonight. Let's talk about contour feathers. So these cover the body and the wing surfaces. They reduce drag and make the birds extremely aerodynamic. They're the most noticeable parts of the bird. They're the biggest and the largest and the smoothest. And they're the ones that we see first. Okay, and they're also the ones that girls like to get tattooed on their arms. Semi-plumes are somewhere between a down feather and a contour feather, is in that they actually are fluffers. They fill up the body of the bird, and they actually what the contour feathers rest on, giving the bird form and shape. And they also act as insulation. They don't have that sleekness. They tend to be a bit more fluffy, but they are basically socking. Someone arriving a bit late, all right? They are stuffing. The other group that we're going to talk about today are down feathers, which are these little wispy bits of feathery things that look like little tufts of cotton. And these are insulators for birds, and they often cover the entire body of chicks because chicks don't fly. So they use them to actually keep their bodies warm, and they're actually very, very, very effective at keeping warm. And you'll find they cover the entire body underneath the contour feathers, and they just keep the bird nice and toasty even when they're flying in the sky. Feathers themselves are a bit like velcro. They have hooks and barbs that hook together, and they'll use their beaks to realign these feathers. Elizabeth is late. Okay, they'll use these hooks and barbs together, and they'll use their beaks to realign them and to pull them into shape to actually make sure the feathers are as smooth and as neat as possible. You can also use your nails to realign feathers if they ever get broken up, but obviously over time they do break down and they have to be replaced by new feathers. So another integral part of birds are the Uropygial glands, and Uropygial glands are found on the back of birds right near the tail feathers, and it looks like a giant gross pimple, to be quite honest. There's a picture there, kind of gross, and it secretes an oily substance called Uropygial oil or Preen oil. And these birds use them to maintain their feathers. They're like hair grease for their hair, and they just use them to smooth out their feathers and line them up. They use their beaks to do all this. Some birds, like parrots and darters, don't have preen glands. Parrots actually have this very fine powder that actually comes off the hair, off the feathers, and they use this to actually maintain their feathers. Darters, by contrast, don't have preen oil because they actually want to get waterlogged. Preen oil, being an oil, is waterproof to an extent, and darters and cormorants don't want to be waterproof because they want to hit the water hard and go in deep. So they want to be as non-water resistant as possible. So they have to work extra hard to maintain their feathers because they don't have preen glands. Preening is a process where birds will poke and prod that preen gland on their back, and then wipe that preen oil all over their feathers like greasy hair gel and smooth out their feathers. This can build up over time, become quite caked, and they have to take various methods to actually get rid of the gel. Some of the methods include actually shedding the feathers over time, but there are easier methods, such as dust bathing. So they'll roll around in the dust, and they'll actually get rid of the excess oil. The oil gets caked in dust and just drops off. They'll also water bathe, like a shower, and nothing quite like a shower to get you clean. I'm sure we've all had birds playing in our dust baths. And they'll scratch as well, just get rid of ticks and mites and bits of dust and fluff and all the muck that gets stuck to their skin. And anting. So birds will sit on top of an ant's nest, they'll fly on top of an ant nest, and they'll get covered in ants from head to toe, and the ants will pick away at them. And some of the scientists say that this is a cleaning mechanism. Other scientists say that from their observations that the birds actually get high, like a drug, off the formic acid that the ants actually exude, and the birds go into a trance-like state. We haven't finally discovered the right answer, but there are multiple different hypotheses out there. But anting is a very common practice in birds, and you'll often find birds just covered in head to toe in ants. They're not dead, they're just getting really high, apparently. Cormorants and darters like this fellow over here don't have preen oil, so they actually have to dry out in the sun in order to get all the water off their feathers. So they'll go and dive into the water, grab their fish, and they'll stand out in the sun with their arms wide open and drip water and finally dry out before going for round 2 or round 3. Now, beak structures are quite complicated because, again, like feathers, there is as many beak structures as there are birds out there, and they all relate to the lifestyle of the bird and their diet. So we're going to talk about some of the different types of diets today, and not go into too much detail because, again, we could be here for a century. So let's talk about frugivores. And these birds tend to have a variety of beaks that help them to exploit the different types of food sources. Depending on the different types of fruit, you'll find the different types of bills. So something that would specialize in figs would have a pecking bill. Something that tends to eat hard, knobbly fruit would have a large bill like a hornbill over here. When fruit is in short supply, many of these guys will eat insects or small animals, small mammals, small reptiles in order to supplement their diet, especially hornbills. They've never been shy of eating small animals. Another individual are Piscivores, which are the fish-eating birds, and these guys come in 2 forms. The stabbers, which are the stalking birds, they wade through the water with their long legs, and they usually have long stabbing spears and stabbing beaks in order to spear and grab their food very effectively, like herrings and egrets and bitterns. The other group are the grabbers, which are usually interceptors. They fly, they don't just stand still, and they come along and they notice the prey and they hit the target hard and use a long beak with a hook on the end to grab onto the prey and pull it in and eat it. Okay, these are usually cormorants and darters, but there are some other birds as well. The carnivores, everyone's favorite, have large hooked beaks for ripping and tearing meat. Many raptors, but a few of the smaller birds like the shrikes also have very similar type beaks, because shrikes will eat mice, they will eat lizards, and they don't swallow them whole. They pick and scrape away the food. Owls have these hooked, sharp beaks, but they tend to be quite small, and this is because they actually eat their food whole. Insectivorous birds have a wide variety of beaks depending on their prey sources. And some of them will have these short little picking beaks for gleaning. They lift up leaves, they lift up rocks, and they actually scrape through the leaf litter and through the detritus looking for grubs to eat, like flycatchers and cuckoos, robins, and thrushes. Others have long, thin beaks in order for grabbing prey mid-flight, like rollers and bee eaters. So depending on the diet, that's actually what will dictate the type of beak they have. Granivores, probably the most common and also sometimes the most annoying, especially if you live around the city. They come in also two main forms. These are huskers, which have short conical bills. The most overdeveloped is probably the thick-billed weaver, and these help them crack open seeds and grains and get to the delicious, yummy bits inside. Peckers have longer, thinner bills, but not thin like obviously like a bee eater, and these help them select and pick seeds out of the grass and out of the ground, and they will let their digestive system do all the hard work for them. These will include pigeons, and of course the galliforms, which are chickens and their cousins. The Nectarivores are probably everyone's favorite, whether they realize it or not, and they have long, highly specialized beaks for probing flowers. They have elongated tongues to lap nectar, and many of them look very similar. They are completely unrelated in many cases. For example, in South Africa, we have sunbirds and sugarbirds. Sunbirds are on their own little mission in life. Sugarbirds, completely unrelated. They're actually more related to babblers, to arrowmark babblers. Arrowmark babblers and all the other babblers, pied babblers, are cousins of the sugarbirds, where sunbirds, although they look similar, completely unrelated. Similar habitats. In the Americas and parts of the other world, in Asia, they've got hummingbirds, also completely unrelated to our sunbirds or our sugarbirds. Just share very similar ecological conditions. Filter feeders, there aren't too many filter feeders out there in South Africa. We've got one of the most common, the flamingos. We've got two kinds, the lesser and the greater. They feed on different kinds of organisms. The one feeds on zooplankton, the other feeds on phytoplankton. But beyond that, the mechanism is the same. They stick their bill into the water and they just suck away for hours like an alcoholic. Probers, again, occupy a wide variety of habitats, and these are wetlands, coastal areas, and grasslands. They're typically small arthropods. They also eat small shellfish like snails. They'll eat mussels, oysters, that sort of thing, and go to town. One of the most loved and adored, of course, is the hardy-daw. Hardy-daw is typically actually a wetland bird, but simply because we've created these conditions for having lawns, which do not exist in nature. The hardy-daws have exploited that opportunity and moved into suburbs. You don't find lawns anywhere in nature. So you don't find hardy-daws occurring really anywhere except for along wetland areas or marshy areas in nature, because that's what the ecological equivalent of a lawn in nature. Birds also have hollow bones, and this is simply because being lightweight helps you fly. If you had solid bones, you would not be able to fly. The only bird that has fully solid bones are the cormorants, and the reason why they have solid bones is because they want to be flying missiles. When they hit the water, they want to go in low and they want to go in deep. So cormorants fly in low. They don't have preen glands, and they don't have hollow bones. They are basically just flying missiles. All other birds have these hollow bones, which maintain their lightness and weight and actually help them to stay in the air for as long as possible, using minimal energy. And there are more bird species today than any other tetrapod. What's a tetrapod? It's a four-legged animal. Hendrik, you are very late. So you're a tetrapod, I'm a tetrapod, a dog's a tetrapod, a cow's a tetrapod, a frog's a tetrapod, a lizard's a tetrapod, a bird's a tetrapod. We have 4 limbs. Now, birds are probably the most varied. Reptiles are the second most varied. There are 4,500 reptiles. Mammals are not that interesting. We've only got a few hundred. So birds have around 10,000. So they're the most diverse. And that's simply because of the amount of habitats that are available to them. So most bird species are able to fly, although I think you knew this already. If you didn't, then you should probably go back to high school. And what grants them the ability to fly is this enlarged sternum along their chest that allows them to have huge chest muscles. So to give you an idea, if you were a bird, you'd have chest muscles out to here. Okay, absolutely gigantic. You can see the sternum detached over there. It looks some sort of weird science fiction blade attached to the chest over there. Gigantic chest muscles. If you've ever eaten a chicken, you would realize how big those chest muscles are compared to something like a cow, which has got tiny chest muscles. And they also have really long neck muscles that help them balance when they're flying. They can extend or contract their neck based on whether they're pitching or rolling or whatever, and this just helps them maintain their balance. Another thing about birds, in order to reduce their weight, is they have these air sacs across their body. We're not going to get into all the different types of air sacs. We don't have time. But what they do is that they reduce the body weight because they're full of air as opposed to hard muscle or bone. And also they store extra air when the bird is flying. Remember we discussed last lesson about the pneumatic ducts in the bird. As it's moving its arms up and down, its wings, it's bringing air in and out of the body without even trying. And a lot of this air goes into the actual air sacs, and they later filter into the lungs, giving the bird extra oxygen, not having to breathe as much manually, and just helping the bird move faster and giving it a higher metabolism, making it faster and more efficient. Digestion is also something really interesting. If any of you guys have kept baby birds, you would know about the crop. So it's essentially just a big sack for storing food, giving it time to store all of this food and just gradually digest over time as and when it gets around to it. Now, after the crop, you get this narrow passage in the throat or in the digestive tract called a proventriloquus, which is a narrow passage that exudes hydrochloric acid, not as scary as it sounds. And it breaks down the hard food. It often just strips away all the hard chemical layers of the food and just softens the food before it enters the gizzard. Now, the gizzard or the ventriloquus is a sack of grinding plates that breaks down the hard food and strips down seed layers. And this is actually what strips all the hard seed layers from all these plants that we want to plant in our garden. Typically, the more focused on meat the bird, the less developed the gizzard. So raptors, birds of prey don't have very advanced gizzards because you don't need to grind meat. You just chew it and swallow it and the digestion does the rest. Whereas if you're eating like hard, grainy foods, you really need to grind it up. So a lot of the other birds will actually eat stones to actually complement the actual grinding process. So they've got all these stones in the digestive tract and it just works with the gizzard to act like a little blender and grind up all the nuts and the seeds and everything into this fine, yummy paste that they can either feed to the chicks or digest themselves. Last lesson, we talked about the pectin gland. We're going a bit more into detail with it. It's actually called the pectin oculi, and it's a special comb-like structure, a gland, that pumps nutrients to the eye. I told you about that last time. Another feature is the fovea, and that's that pinpoint at the back of your eye in which light focuses. That's the sharpest vision you have. Whenever you look at an object and the sharpest point of vision, it's when you're focusing with your fovea. Birds have a far more advanced fovea than us, and they have got vision that would make us weep. Birds that hunt on the wing have two fovea. This is incredible. And it gives them extremely sharp vision. Okay, so raptors, birds of prey, vultures, bee eaters, rollers, all these birds that hunt on the wing, they tend to have two fovea and it gives them hyper advanced vision. To give you an idea, something like a falcon can pick up a mouse 20 kilometers away. A vulture can see a dead carcass 50 kilometers away. They don't smell it, they see it. A contrast between the New World vultures, being the American vultures, and the older vultures, being African and Asian vultures. American vultures smell the dead food, and older vultures will see the dead food, will see the carcasses. So they can see something up to 50 kilometers away. It's absolutely incredible. I can't see more than half a kilometer at the best of times. Okay, the spectrums of light. Everything is on wavelengths. All light is a wavelength. Everything is a wavelength. Okay, ranging from cosmic rays through gamma rays, X-rays, ultraviolet, all of visible light, right through to infrared, microwaves, radar, radio, and broadcast bands. happens. Okay, everything is either a wave or a particle, except for light. Light's weird. Okay, we're not going to. This is starting to get into the realm of quantum physics. We're not going to go play with this because this is going to hurt all of our brains. But to make you understand is that you can only see certain bands of light. Okay, certain bands of waves. We've got fairly narrow range. We can see a little bit of the UV and a little bit of the IR, but we can see pretty much everything in between here. Birds can see well further than all of this, and a lot more shades in here than we could ever begin to comprehend. Okay, they obviously can't see gamma rays and X-rays and radio waves because they're not X-Men, but they can see a lot more than we could ever envision. And this gives them all sorts of advantages. They can see things that appear to be camouflaged, but to them are not camouflaged. Like we have a wattle lapwing from Asia over here, not the same as the African wattle lapwing. On the left, you can see what would appear to us. On the right is this what it would look like to a bird. Okay. So far more colored. So what looks like black and yellow is actually a multicolored gaudy extravaganza to another bird species, especially its mate, who would be highly attuned to noticing what kind of bird, what it actually looks like. So we're pretty crappy in terms of our depth of vision. We don't have much going on. Humans have got, of all the mammals, probably one of the most, if not the most advanced color perception, but compared to birds, it's jack. We don't know anything. Eggs. Eggs are, again, come in a wide variety of shapes and sizes. And one thing is that all birds lay eggs. And the yolk and the amniotic fluid is the egg white, is produced first in the ovaries and finally coated in the calcium carbonate structure in the uterus before finally being laid. And the shape of the egg is directly linked to the nesting habits of the bird. So you'll find that birds that tend to nest in the ground have these elongated eggs, whereas birds that tend to nest in trees or in nests will tend to have more circular eggs. The reason for this is that if you've got an elongated egg, it's harder for the egg to roll. Okay, if it rolls, it'll roll in a circle. If it's circular, it'll roll in any direction. And also, when you're circular, you tend to have less surface area, so you're more efficient. You can have more eggs in the nest. So you will have more eggs in the nest in the arboreal bird that tend to be circular, and you'll have more elongated eggs on birds that nest on the ground. Nest types, again, there's many kinds of nests, but we're going to go through some basics. Nests are extremely varied and relate to the lifestyle of the parents. There are dozens of various nesting types, but we'll look at a few basic forms. Platform nests. These are typically made by large arboreal birds. They're in trees or on top of cliffs or on top of power lines. And there are a mash of twigs and branches with no real structure. And these eggs are usually not camouflaged because they say, what the bloody hell? I don't have to do any effort. I'll just build a mash of twigs and sticks and put some eggs on it, and it'll be fine. Raptors, birds of prey, storks, these guys all make these sorts of nests, okay? And they don't have to do much work because they're fairly large and they can defend their nests. Scrape nests are usually by terrestrial birds, galliforms, chondriiforms, remember the coastal wetland birds. And they're almost always highly camouflaged. They look like little rocks. You have a hard time finding them. And some species will line their nests with sticks and stones, but not all of them. So quails, chickens, plovers, grouses, they all lay their nests in these sorts of conditions, and they're almost always highly camouflaged. Burrow nests. Certain birds will build their nests in burrows on the ground or on soft cliffs. They'll scrape them into sandstone and into sandy riverbeds. And they're often lined with feathers, but not always, okay? Some of these include bee-eaters, rollers, kingfishers. Some owl species do this as well. Cavity nests, some of my favorites. And these are usually in the cavities of trees, but they're often found within urban environments too. So the cavities are made by some species, in the case of woodpeckers. Other species rely on third parties, like woodpeckers, to make the nest, and they'll move in later. So hornbills, for example, cannot make their own nests. They need something like a woodpecker to make a hole in a tree, and they'll move into those trees over time. Also, owls do the same. So if woodpeckers move out of the area, then these hornbills won't move into the area. And that's why it's actually a really good idea to have dead trees in your garden, because if you have dead trees, you attract woodpeckers. The woodpeckers make holes in those trees. Later, other birds like barbets and hornbills move into those holes. So a dead tree is just as valuable as a living tree. Don't cut down your dead trees. The most well-known nests usually are the cup nests. We all know these, every kid knows these. And they're usually in highly secluded spots within deep vegetation. And they're often decorated to be highly camouflaged with moss, spider webs, leaf litter. They make them really intricate and quite difficult to notice. And you really have to look hard to find them. Again, probably everyone's favorite nests are the enclosed nests, aka the weavers. They're usually highly intricate nests that are usually built by weavers and related species. Many species build their nests in large communities to ensure that their protection for these nests by having big communities where they can watch out for each other. Some of them also build over water, some of them build reef beds, making it really inaccessible. Now, moving on from nests between male and females is something called sexual dimorphism. Now, sexual dimorphism, where there's a distinct difference between the males and females. Usually the male is far more colorful and more brightly colored than the female. Many species that look exactly the same, but in many species like this peacock over here, as you can see, he looks completely different to the female. Males in many species are also much smaller than the females, particularly in bird of prey. And the reason for this is that with birds of prey, they got to hunt their food. And the bigger you are, the more food you need. So being slightly smaller gives you an advantage. You don't have to catch a baby impala every week. You have to catch a baby impala every 2 weeks. So being a male, you have to work less hard for your food. Females, on the other hand, have to carry eggs before they lay them. And so you need to be slightly bigger in order to carry as many eggs as possible. That would be functional to your species survival. So the females tend to be far bigger than the males. And you can often see this side by side. You'll see two birds of prey. The smaller is always the male. Hatchlings, moving on to hatchlings, we get two kinds of hatchlings. The first is altricial, which are born blind, naked, and helpless. And these guys are typically in nests that are in trees. And they can afford to be blind, naked, and helpless because nothing's going to eat them most of the time, except for monkeys or things that happen to find the nest. By contrast, we get precocial tricks, which are mobile and independent from the day they are born. Why this? Because if you're nesting on the ground, you don't want these naked, blind, helpless chicks running or lying around the ground waiting for a jackal to come and eat them. The moment they can move is the moment they can survive and take care of themselves. So chickens, a lot of the chadriar forms, a lot of the coastal species that live in wetlands, they have these baby chicks that can run around from the day they're born. And it just facilitates their survival far better. The chicks often have to develop far faster using more resources, whereas altricial chicks can take their time and really just develop slower, putting less pressure on the parents. So there's benefits to both methods. Brood parasites. Now, many bird species are terrible parents and would rather shift the responsibility to others. We call these birds brood parasites. And the most well-known, of course, are cuckoos. I mean, everyone knows about cuckoo. But there are others. So some include whiters, widowbirds, cuckoo finches, honey guides, and even certain ducks. In North America, there's quite a few duck species that are brood parasites. In South Africa, the mako duck will be lazy and lay its eggs in the nests of other ducks, saying, screw it, I don't care, not my job. So most brood parasite chicks will kill the host chicks. However, certain species like indigo birds will be raised alongside the host chicks and just coexist, basically a bunch of hippies. Most parasites have a preference for two or four different host species. However, some have only got one host, but generally the more hosts you have available to you, the better it is for you to be able to spread your eggs around. Last week we talked about passerines. Now, passerines are known as perching birds, and they account for roughly 5,000 of the 10,000 bird species out there. They are very diverse. And they're also referred to songbirds. And the reason why they're referred to songbirds is that they learn their calls from their parents. They can learn new calls. And this is one of the reasons why their calls vary from one area to the next. In fact, with crows learn different languages. And if you take a crow from Cape Town and a crow from the Highveld, they won't understand each other at all. They'll think they're different species. They won't even breed because they speak a completely different language to each other. So with most bird species, or with half bird species, it's genetic inheritance of the language, that they just make the calls their parents make, even though they don't learn it. But with songbirds, the parents teach the calls. It's a mimetic language. Like we learn the language from our parents, these birds learn the language from their parents. And the vast majority of passerines are insect eaters with short pecking beaks, like wagtails, long claws. Some are granivores, like canaries and finches, but most are like thrushes and swallows. And robins, they are insectivores. And they will be very habitat specific, and they will often move out of areas if the vegetation changes, like cisticolas. Cisticolas are almost only found in acacia and sycamore thickets. So if the sycamore disappears, they move out. Passerines also have a very basic foot structure, which we call ansiodactyl, which is limited movement. It's just there for grasping. There's no real functionality beyond grip. And they're highly adapted for birching into branches. Other birds also have ansiodactyl footprints with feet, like birds of prey, and they can just grab onto prey. They don't have much other function. So birds are, again, their feet are as specialized as their beaks or as their feathers, and the feet are directly linked to their lifestyle. We're not going to go through all the feet because that's a whole year of studies on its own, but you can study it on your own time. We're going to do two kinds of feet today. The ansiodactyl, which are simple foot structures, which are made to perch in some species like the passerines and grab prey in others like the raptors, the accipiters. Now, canaries, crows, larks, and raptors all have this 3-toe forward, 1-toe back structure, just like the velociraptors of the past. The other type of foot that we're going to talk about today are zygodactyl, which are 2-toe forward, 2-toe back, and these help them grip onto vertical surfaces. Woodpeckers, barbets, excuse the spelling over there, cuckoos, parrots, honey guys, all have these kinds of these toes, which allow them to grip onto vertical surfaces and cling and move around. So I'm sure you've ever had a pet parrot or a pet lovebird. You'll see he's got 2 toes forward, 2 toes back, and that's what we call a zygodactyl foot. Heterodactyl is similar, semantics, basically the same thing. Now, cooling is a big problem with bird because mammals burn around 36.5 degrees Celsius. Birds burn around 40 degrees Celsius in terms of their body temperature. So overheating is a huge problem. And they have many ways of keeping cool: bathing in water, getting in the shade, and so on and so forth. One of the most common ways for big birds is to spray uric acid, their urea, on their legs. Like this marabou stork over here. As you can see, he has white legs over there. His legs are not naturally white, they're actually gray. He's smothered his legs in uric acid, and obviously as the uric acid evaporates, it helps cool his legs down. Now, another problem is, of course, keeping warm. Birds have a very high metabolism, and because of this, they lose heat very quickly. So they'll fluff their feathers up, they'll cluster together in groups, they'll minimize the surface area by huddling into little balls. All our ways of ensuring that they keep warm. Long-legged birds will also stand on one leg. Okay, this will reduce the surface area exposed to the wind and actually help keep them warm. They also crunch in their necks, helping their bodies reduce the surface area, like this fellow over here. So you can see he's raising one leg up, keeping it out of the wind, and also scrunching his neck up, reducing the surface area. He's basically keeping himself as warm as possible in the horrible, windy, wetland conditions. Now, migrations. We are in winter at the moment, and a lot of our bird species have disappeared for the winters. And certain bird species are residents all year round, while others are migrating with the seasons. Typically, the diet and competition between other species play a major role in whether or not a bird is a migratory species. And many bird species have iron deposits in the base of their bill, allowing them to pick up the Earth's magnetic fields. We call these magnetites. They assist them in moving between the northern and southern hemispheres. And other species have deposits in their brains and their eyes, allowing them to see these magnetic fields. So pigeons have magnetites in their brains, in their eyes, and in their beak, actually making them phenomenally effective at picking up magnetic fields, and they almost never get lost. Very, very, that's why we use pigeons for carrying messages. Some of the migration patterns that we have in Africa are altitudinal patterns where they move between the low veld and the high veld, depending on the seasons. We also have intra-African migrants, which move between North Africa and South Africa, depending on the seasons. Another type, we have the Palearctic migrants, which move between Asia, Europe, and Africa, depending on the seasons. So birds are not just cute, fluffy things, they have an ecological value. And they are seed dispersers. A lot of plants would not grow without being digested by birds first. And they're also food source for predators. Red-billed quillies breed in the billions, and they're an important food source for many kinds of predators out there, including large birds of prey. They control populations of insects. In the 1960s in China, Mao Zedong decreed that birds were competing with people for food, so he had all the birds in China eradicated. In 1962, until 1964, they had a massive explosion of caterpillars and locusts, which wiped out 95% of all the crops in China, ended up killing 20 million people because they starved to death because of all the locusts and caterpillars, because the Chinese had wiped out their birds. I lived in China for 5 years. Still to this day, in the 2000s, there's not that many birds in China. The numbers have still not recovered. Habitat creators. Woodpeckers create holes in trees. This is not only beneficial to the woodpeckers, it's also beneficial to barbets, to monitor lizards that live in the trees, squirrels that live in the trees, other insects that live in the trees, and a variety of other organisms. Snakes nest in the holes of these trees. So they create habitats for other animals, and these animals will not live there. So birds have incredible ecological value, not economic too, I suppose. Now, major threats to birds are invasive animals. For instance, the Steven Island case. The flightless wren was a wren similar to a little pipit, which inhabited New Zealand. New Zealand never had any native mammals until the Europeans arrived, except for bats. There were no mammals on New Zealand except bats. Europeans came along with cats, dogs, and rats. Within a few years, the flightless wren had been obliterated to one small island, except for Steven Island, which is in the middle of New Zealand. A lighthouse keeper moved in there in the 1800s, and within 2 years, that one cat, completely wiped out the last of the flightless wrens, otherwise known as Lyell wrens. The Lyell's wren went completely extinct because of one cat. Invasive plants outcompete native plant species. In particular, we've seen large tracts of areas which were inhabited by acacia thickets and sycamore thickets being eradicated by invasive plants, and these have seen a decline in cisticola numbers across southern Africa. Pollution has eradicated large numbers of marine birds. 60% of all marine birds have been found to have plastic pollution in their gullets, and their gizzards. Nothing we can do about it beyond the fact that we need to stop using plastics. Sport hunting wiped out the passenger pigeon along with habitat loss in the United States. They hunted them to extinction for entertainment. And of course, urban development was a massive destroyer of ecosystems until recently we've stopped encroachment to wetlands. So, but of all of these two, invasive plants and invasive animals, surprisingly, are probably the biggest destroyers of bird life. To give you an idea, the United States estimates they lose around 4.5 billion birds a year to feral and domestic cats. Australia reckons they lose around 300 million birds a year to feral and domestic cats. So cats are bad, as cute as they are. Mongooses have also been introduced to many areas, many islands, and they've completely wiped out native bird species. So that was my little chat to this evening on birds. I know it's a hell of a crash course. It was a lot of material. I will be uploading this video onto YouTube. On Saturday night, we're going to be doing a Q&A for any questions you guys might have. If you have any questions you want to ask me beforehand, please do. Likewise, if you have not confirmed your emailing for me, please do tonight or tomorrow, because I'm going to start deleting email addresses on Sunday, and I will only be emailing the people on the list who have confirmed from Sunday onward for next week. Thank you for having me. I hope you learned something. As usual, Pathfinder by Janessa Pullela, one of my inspirational books, Beat Around the Bush. I think everyone's got this book by now. Vertebrate Life by F. Harvey Plow. Buy this book. Robert's Bird Software, better than the books. eBirds, subscribe. Birdlife.org.za. You should already be on this. If you're not, why not? And nature.com and wikipedia.com. You can never go wrong with those guys. Thanks very much for having me tonight. Auf Wiedersehen. Adios. Arrivederci. Bon voyage. Assalamu alaikum. Salagashle, etc., etc. Thank you. I know it was a hell of a material. Cheerio, goodbye. And again, if you have any questions, you're more than welcome to ask me on WhatsApp. Bye-bye, guys. See you on Saturday. Okay, logging out.